This is Dan Dicks here reporting for Press for Truth. The World Health Organization has just launched a global monkeypox strategy, including strategic vaccinations. Gee, who could have seen that one coming, guys? The World Health Organization, the WHO, is launching a global strategy to halt the transmission of Mpox, formerly called monkeypox. The plan, announced on August 26th, will entail a strategic vaccination campaign. The UN Health Agency, which declared a public health emergency of international concern 2 weeks ago, said that the plan is going to last 6 months. It's going to start in September of 2024, and it's going to go to February of 2025, and it's going to receive $135 million in funding. Strategic vaccination efforts will target people at the highest risk, such as close contacts of recent cases and healthcare workers, to interrupt transmission chains. Gee, that sounds familiar. Here it is, guys. The Global Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan, launched by the World Health Organization to contain the Mpox outbreak. And here they talk about their strategic vaccination efforts that's going to focus on interrupting transmission chains. And the fact that they are even suggesting that this is possible is absolutely insane when you consider that we have just witnessed the opposite happen over the last 4 years. May I remind you, everyone was told that the COVID 1984 vaccine was supposedly going to stop transmission to this apparent virus, and now we're being told it apparently mutates all the time into new variants, and you can't keep up with the transmissions. In fact, you're going to have to get a booster every 6 months now. So amazing how the story changed, you know. And now they expect us to just forget about all of that. And they say they're going to introduce a new strategic vaccination effort to interrupt the transmission chains of Mpox. Guys, it's going to take a great deal of propaganda to once again convince everybody that this is going to be the case. And that brings me to my next point, guys. I wanted to show you this from the University of Waterloo, who just developed a big data ecosystem for evaluating health misinformation on social media. Check this out. Infodemics. Digital misinformation on social media has led to harmful and costly beliefs in the general population. Notably, these beliefs have resulted in public health crises to the detriment of governments worldwide and their citizens. Consequently, there's a critical need for an expert system capable of processing vast amounts of health-related digital data to detect patterns of public health misinformation. To address this need, this research designed and developed the UMass, a big data pipeline and ecosystem for identifying and analyzing health misinformation on social media. Now, CTV News here thinks that this one tool that is identifying false health claims on social media is a life or death issue that we're dealing with here. And the article, I would say, goes on to kind of let the cat out of the bag and reveals a lot about what's going on here. When you read this part, they say, we found that physicians are the most trusted source of health information for Canadians, closely followed by nurses and pharmacists. Says Reamer, that privilege gives us the opportunity to address false health claims head on. Ladies and gentlemen, they are taking a page directly out of the book Propaganda, published in 1938 by Edward Bernays, from the chapter The Psychology of Public Relations. And I'm going to break this one down for you, how they are utilizing Edward Bernays' propaganda to convince you to go along with this massive scam, even though our very eyes, you know, saw them lie about it with COVID 1984. It's absolutely wild, guys. So we're going to cover all of that and much more in this video. But really quickly, just before we do, I'd ask that you check me out here at pressfortruth.ca/donate. If you appreciate my efforts to bring you guys this information. Here you can do a one-time donation with PayPal. You could do Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies by clicking there. You could join me on this Patreon alternative for a monthly reoccurring contribution. You can also do so here by clicking at Subscribe Star. $5 a month or $10 a month, whatever is with your means, is very greatly appreciated, guys. You can also send an e-transfer to dan@pressfortruth.ca, or you can send stuff to my P.O. box, guys. Links for all of this is located in the description below on whatever video platform you happen to be watching this on. So thank you so much to everybody who takes 1 minute today to contribute to my efforts here financially to bring you this information here at Press for Truth. All right, guys, let's jump right into this. This is the Global Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan that was launched by the WHO to contain Mpox. The World Health Organization today launched a Global Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan to stop outbreaks of human-to-human transmission of Mpox through coordinated global, regional, and national efforts. This follows the declaration of a public health emergency of international concern by the WHO Director General on August 14th. It's amazing how fast these things go, isn't it? The current plan is subject to input by members of the states who were briefed on the plan on Friday, August 23rd. The plan covers the 6-month period of September 2024 to February of 2025, envisioning a $135 million funding need for the response by WHO, member states, and partners, including Africa's Center for Disease Control and Prevention, communities, and researchers, among others. A funding appeal for the WHO needs to deliver on the plan will be launched shortly. Now, the plan, which builds on temporary recommendations and standing recommendations issued by the WHO Director General, focuses on implementing comprehensive surveillance, prevention, readiness, and response strategies, advancing research and equitable access to medical countermeasures like diagnostic tests and vaccines, minimizing animal-to-human transmission, and empowering communities to actively participate in outbreak prevention and control. That's perhaps another topic for a whole new video. But here's where things get wild. Strategic vaccination efforts will focus on individuals at higher risk, including the close contacts of recent cases and healthcare workers, to interrupt transmission chains. And again, I can't believe that they would suggest that this is, what the world needs after we all, as I said, just blatantly witnessed a massive phony misinformation campaign coming directly from the government, who tried to suggest that these things here are going to stop transmission when they did absolutely nothing of the sort. Now, they're trying to convince you to do the same thing with this global monkeypox strategy, which is going to include strategic vaccinations. And as I said, I think they let the cat out of the bag here when they admitted in this study here, which is supposedly identifying misinformation, when it comes to health information online, where they say they found that it's the physicians who are the most trusted sources, followed by nurses and pharmacists. And that's the privilege that gives us the opportunity to address false health claims head on. So let me read to you directly from Edward Bernays' propaganda that was written, I'll remind you, in 1938. This is from the chapter, The Psychology of Public Relations, and this is so important to understand. So just bear with me as we get through this, because this is absolutely phenomenal here. Says, it was one of the doctrines of the reaction psychology that a certain stimulus, often repeated, would create a habit, or that the mere reiteration of an idea would create a conviction. Suppose the old type of salesmanship, acting for a meat packer, for example, was seeking to increase the sales of bacon. It would reiterate innumerable times in full-page advertisements, "Eat more bacon. Eat bacon because it's cheap, because it's good, because it gives you reserve energy." The newer salesmanship, the propagandists, I would add, understanding the group structure of society and the principles of mass psychology, would first ask, well, who is it that influences the eating habits of the public? The answer, obviously, is the physicians. So the new salesman will then suggest to physicians to say publicly that it is wholesome to eat bacon. He knows as a mathematical certainty that large numbers of persons will follow the advice of their doctors, because he understands the psychological relation of dependence on men upon their physicians. The old-fashioned propagandists, using almost exclusively the appeal of the printed word, tried to persuade the individual reader to buy a definite article immediately. This approach is exemplified in a type of advertisement which used to be considered ideal from the viewpoint of the directiveness and effectiveness. So, for example, you, perhaps with a big finger pointing at the reader, buy O'Leary's rubber heels now. The advertiser sought by means of reiteration and emphasis directed upon the individual to break down or penetrate sales resistance. Although the appeal was aimed at 50 million persons, it was aimed at each one as an individual. The new salesmanship has found it possible, by dealing with men in the mass through their group formations, to set up psychological and emotional currents which will work for him. Instead of assaulting sales resistance by direct attack, he is interested in removing sales resistance. He creates circumstances which will swing emotional currents so as to make for purchaser demand. This is where things get wild, guys. He lays out a perfect example. If, for instance, I want to sell pianos or vaccines to the global population, it's not sufficient to just blanket the country with a direct appeal, such as, you, buy a Mozart piano now. It's cheap. The best artists use it. It's going to last for years. Well, the claims may all be true, but they're in direct conflict with the claims of other piano manufacturers. And they're in indirect competition with the claims of a radio or a motor car, each competing for the consumer's dollar. So what are the true reasons why this purchaser is planning to spend his money on a new car instead of a new piano? Is it because he decided that he wants a commodity called locomotion more than he wants a commodity called music? Not altogether. He buys a car because it is at the moment the group custom to buy cars. The modern propagandist, therefore, sets to work to create circumstances which will modify that custom. He appeals perhaps to the home instinct, which is fundamental. He will endeavor to develop public acceptance of the idea of a music room in the home. This he may do, for example, by organizing an exhibition of period music rooms designed by well-known decorators who themselves exert an influence on the buying groups. He enhances the effectiveness and the prestige of these rooms by putting in them rare and valuable tapestries. Then, in order to create dramatic interest in the exhibit, he stages an event or a ceremony. To this ceremony, key people, persons known to influence the buying habits of the public, like, famous people, such as a famous violinist, a popular artist, a society leader, they are invited. These key persons affect other groups, lifting the idea of a music room to a place in the public consciousness which it did not have before. The juxtaposition of these leaders and the idea which they are dramatizing are then projected to the wider public through various publicity channels. Meanwhile, influential architects have been persuaded to make the music room an integral architectural part of their plans, with perhaps a specially charming niche in one corner for the piano. Less influential architects will then, as a matter of course, imitate what is done by the men whom they consider masters of their profession. They, in turn, will implant the idea of the music room into the mind of the general public. The music room will be accepted because it has been made the thing. And the man or woman who has a music room or has arranged a corner of the parlor for a musical corner will naturally think of buying a piano. It will come to him as if it was his own idea. Under the old salesmanship, the manufacturer said to the prospective purchaser, "Please buy a piano." The new salesmanship has reversed the process and caused the prospective purchaser to say to the manufacturer, "Please sell me a piano." Whew, that gives me chills. This is exactly how they are operating, utilizing Edward Bernays' Psychology of Public Relations chapter from his book on propaganda on how you can use doctors and nurses and physicians. Look at that. Physicians and nurses and pharmacists as the privileged, trusted source to hand out all the information. Again, this is a direct play out of Edward Bernays' book, Propaganda. Guys, I want to point you to this interview I did with the one and only Edward Griffin, titled Big Pharma in the Age of COVID-19 84, to better understand our current situation regarding the COVID-19 84 scamdemic. It's important to understand the history of how Big Pharma came about, who the major players are, and what their ultimate goal is. Following the First and Second World Wars, companies like IG Farben in Germany and Standard Oil of the US began forming a cartel with the single goal of monopolizing the entire health and wellness industry. You fast forward to today's COVID-19 84 nightmare, and you'll find it's the same players with the same agendas. In this video, Dicks Press for Truth speaks with author and researcher Edward Griffin about the history of Big Pharma, how that ties into our world today, and most importantly, what you as an individual can do about it to help turn this situation around. A really important interview for you to see in order to understand how, all of this, propaganda came about through people like the Rockefellers, working through companies like IG Farben as they created this Big Pharma, essentially. And again, as I said, utilized Edward Bernays' own ideas of the psychology of public relations to manipulate the masses here. It's absolutely wild stuff, guys. So I just wanted to bring all of this to your attention. They've already got this big data ecosystem trying to evaluate health misinformation on social media as they try to push their own misinformation that should be blatantly obvious by now. Guys, I want to leave you today with a video that I made way back in 2016 titled On the Viability of Conspiratorial Beliefs, Debunked. Because it was back in 2016 that Dr. David Grimes published a paper allegedly proving that conspiracy theories don't add up by using math and statistics. The paper is called On the Viability of Conspiratorial Beliefs, and it was published in the open access peer-reviewed journal PLOS 1. This paper may be the best example of why peer-reviewed doesn't equal scientific proof. In this video, Dicks Press for Truth tears apart this poorly produced paper and shows how the so-called skeptic community can be just as dogmatic as the very ones that they are accusing. A very important video for everyone to understand. So since it's been a long time since I put this one out there, guys, way back in 2016, there's a good chance you haven't seen it, and even if you have, it's a good time to watch it again because there's vital information contained in this video. So I want to show you that. Just before we do, guys, I want to remind you, don't forget to check me out here, pressfortruth.ca/donate. Once again, thank you so much to everybody who just takes 1 minute today to support my efforts to bring you this info here at Press for Truth. And without further ado, guys, here's my video titled On the Viability of Conspiratorial Beliefs, Debunked. Check it out.
The more people who are involved in a conspiracy, the greater the odds are of that conspiracy getting exposed. That's human nature. That's why clandestine operations are compartmentalized, so no single person or group of people really understand what they're working on. They are pieces of a larger whole which they don't quite comprehend. That's how the Manhattan Project stayed secret for so long, and that's how the elite get away with their operations today. But recently, Dr. David Grimes has published a paper allegedly proving that conspiracy theories don't add up by using math and statistics. The corporate state media picked up on the paper, and every so-called skeptic has been sharing the findings as if it were definite proof. So let's take this apart. The paper is called On the Viability of Conspiratorial Beliefs and was published in the open access peer-reviewed journal PLOS 1. This paper may be the best example of why peer-reviewed doesn't equal scientific proof. Ignoring the argument of compartmentalization, the basic premise is that if man-made climate change is false, or if vaccines weren't safe, or that if there was a cancer cure that is purposely covered up because it's not patentable, If those things were true, so many people would have to be in on it that leaks would occur and the conspiracy would be exposed. Here's the problem. One would want to select numerous examples of existing theories of different sizes and durations, and plot them all on a chart. To be truly objective and research-orientated, one would want to have a lot of data points. If you did this, you may even see a pattern between the number of people involved and the months it took before someone exposed the conspiracy. The actual paper, however, only uses 3 examples and extrapolated from that. They were the NSA's PRISM program, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, and the inaccuracy of many FBI forensic tests. Another problem arises since the number of people involved with these affairs is unknown. Grimes just guesses, putting the number of people involved with the NSA at 30,000. In reality, the PRISM program could have involved just 100 people, or even as little as 10. The data points Grimes used were completely useless. He didn't use enough examples, and the few he did use were not reliable. What's missing is data on conspiracies that have remained secret. Not to mention, 2 of the 3 conspiracies he picked were before the internet era, omitting a rather major variable. There also weren't any small conspiracies in his paper, just 3 examples of big institutional affairs. All 3 are also based in the United States, with 2 of them in spying agencies where secrecy is a part of their job. From these bad examples, Grimes calculates the likelihood of someone in the conspiracy blabbing about it and exposing the operations. In a given year, Grimes calculates this at about 0.5/10,000%. This is ridiculous. If this minuscule, quantum-sized number was true, we wouldn't have the word gossip in the dictionary. No one would ever spread rumors or talk about people behind their back. There wouldn't be criminal laws and common law offenses regarding conspiracies. This is just one of the problems of equating mathematics with human action. People don't act like numbers in an equation. This is one of the reasons mathematical economics has been such a dismal failure. Real-life examples have already disproven Grimes' paper. The email leak from the University of East Anglia, which exposed fraudulent practices in climate change science, is a perfect example. As well, Grimes did not account for any deaths in his math. Some people naturally die off, taking knowledge of the conspiracy to their grave, or they are killed to keep the conspiracy from becoming exposed. Like Lee Harvey Oswald's murder as he was being taken away by police, telling the TV cameras, "I am just a patsy." The CIA have now admitted they withheld information about the JFK assassination from the Warren Commission. The static population assumption in Grimes' paper shouldn't have been ignored if this was truly a scientific paper on the nature of conspiracy theories. Perhaps the real conspiracy is why this bad paper was hailed as science, while real exposed conspiracies, the ones that become less important to conceal years after they happen, are neglected. This just goes to show that the so-called skeptic community can be just as dogmatic as the rest of us. Nobody is immune to ideology. The key is being able to keep an open mind and revise your beliefs when necessary. There wasn't much of that in this paper. This was just bad science, coupled with confirmation bias. Thanks for watching, stay vigilant, and as always, my friends, press for truth.